In January 2007, as Pluto loomed at the end of Sagittarius, Vanity Fair published an essay by its longtime horoscope columnist Michael Lutin. The piece overtly predicted upheaval for the United States during the coming 20-ish year transit of Pluto's journey through Capricorn. Right after the publication, Vanity Fair ended Michael Lutin's contract. Back in those pre-social media days, he posted about it on his website, which was basically just a page of text he updated by adding new thoughts at the top. When the column didn't appear the next month, he wrote something along the lines of, "Wondering what happened to the horoscopes in VF? You'll have to ask them." I remember exactly where I was when I read this column. I was 21, and I was in the kitchen of the apartment I shared with my college boyfriend in Southie in South Boston, and I was honestly really depressed at this time in my life, but I was also kind of having a spiritual awakening, and I remember reading this and just feeling this very profound sense of knowing and a sense of like expansion beyond my own smaller temporary problems. Like, okay, wow, something big really is coming during my lifetime. So today, this article is resurfacing, and people are taking note of how incredibly prophetic it turned out to be. Just the other day, Vanity Fair officially republished it with a little editor's note, although there is no mention of Lutin's column being canceled after the piece first ran. And I'll say a little bit more about that later, but in this video, I thought it would be fun to read this article together, and I will offer a bit of commentary before and as we go through, and a little bit after too. For anyone new here, hello, I'm Hummingbird. I am a mundane astrologer with a background in history and politics, and on this channel we talk about the fall of the American Empire and how the astrology is tracking with it in real time. We also talk about other aspects of collapse, like climate collapse, the techno-fascist takeover, cultural and spiritual collapse, so much fun stuff. I try to do that with groundedness and grace, and if that sounds like your jam, consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, maybe even becoming a channel member. Also, I do want to welcome new folks who are here for my last few videos. Doomer Astrology and the one on JD Vance have gotten more circulation than normal for me, so if you are resonating, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we have found each other. Okay, so let's get into it. I want to give you a little context for this essay before we read it, just a little about Michael Lutin, his place in the astrology world, and a little about my experience with his work. It's kind of wild to look back on, since I never would have foreseen myself as an astrologer in 2007, and I also did not have a sense of coming apocalypse back then, and yet this essay, like I said, it had a profound impact on me. I never forgot about it. It was one of those things that my mind would drift back to every once in a while, seemingly for no reason. And then about 8 years later, I started studying astrology more actively, and I kind of ran headfirst into the US Pluto return, which is clearly one of the key transits that Lutin was tracking for this essay, even though I think he only mentions it once. So anyway, just interesting how things come together and circle back around over time. And so for those who aren't familiar, Michael Lutin, RIP, was what I call an OG astrologer, a pre-internet astrologer. He passed about a year ago, I think. He was kind of a celebrity astrologer, which I guess obviously the Vanity Fair astrologer inevitably would be. He came up in the 80s and 90s, and he had a website, which I just remember with so much fondness now in comparison to the social media environment. It was just like different lines of text. He would sometimes like not even write in full sentences, but it was just like a dark background. The text would be like different bright colors sometimes, but basically just like dark background, super basic font text, and he would put his latest update at the top of the page and leave everything else just there below it. The page kept getting longer and longer. I think there was probably like a few other pages on the website for the weekly or monthly, but it was just like so low key, and I do miss that. And Michael Lutin was a really good and also clearly really intuitive astrologer. He made some very specific mundane predictions that were accurate. There's at least one example of that in this essay, which we'll get to. And he also wrote really good regular horoscopes. And I feel like the astrology landscape has changed so much, and the astrology audience has changed so much and become so educated, that the art and magic of horoscope writing for normies, like people that only know their sun sign, it's kind of lost a lot of its importance. And I don't know how much anybody is really doing that anymore, but you'll see in this essay, he does mention a few transits by name, but mostly it's written in a way that keeps the specifics kind of behind the veil and just gives you his translation of it all, like his gestalt. Which I will say, as an astrological writer, that is much harder than not. Sun sign horoscopes are much harder to write than rising sign horoscopes. It's easier to tell rather than show, but a really good horoscope writer, and also, you know, again, it depends on who your audience is, and the audience has changed a lot these days, and my writing and speaking is a little more for like an advanced astrology audience who already kind of speaks the language, but yeah, it's a whole different magic and skill set to be able to speak the language of astrology to people who don't really speak it on their own. And he was really amazing at that. So he wrote really good monthly sun sign horoscopes that were published in Vanity Fair. And I loved Vanity Fair. When I was in college, I kind of had some investigative journalism dreams, and I thought Vanity Fair was like the cream of the crop for interesting, in-depth investigative journalism. It was the one magazine that I physically subscribed to and like read cover to cover every month. And that was how I first connected with astrology, was Michael Lutin's horoscopes in Vanity Fair. And so that was like about 2 years before this column came out that I was starting to read his horoscopes. And yeah, I don't know if you guys find that interesting, but I am finding it kind of wild just thinking about it, that Michael Lutin was my intro to astrology so far before I was ever really consciously thinking about astrology and politics. And he's also the one who wrote this very prophetic essay, which is resurfacing now as my work is also getting at least a tiny bit more traction talking about this same stuff. All right, so just a few other thoughts and specifics for context. I'm going to skip the editor's note, but I'll link this below, so feel free to check that out. The original essay was published in the January 2007 issue of Vanity Fair. So remember, this is before Obama's election. This is before the subprime mortgage crisis and eventually full-on market crash, before the Great Recession, before the Occupy movement. Those things were all coming like in the next few years when this essay was published. Lutin gives some dates which are a little off from the tropical zodiac, and it looks like he was using a true sidereal calculation for some reason. I don't know why he would do that, especially because he's not using true sidereal when he talks about the transits that were happening in the present at that time. So I don't know. I will address the date discrepancies a little more when we come to them. And I'll also say Michael Lutin was a white man, maybe even a boomer. I'm not sure when he was born exactly, but there will be plenty of American exceptionalism in here and other little things that might rub an educated leftist the wrong way. But honestly, I think he names empire pretty well. I think he does it more coherently than most astrologers do even today, really. And given the zeitgeist at the time, like this is super early on, even in the global war on terror, I think this is actually a pretty solid take. All right, with that, let's read the essay. All alone and more paranoid by the day, President George W. Bush is getting it from all sides. And despite his bravado, which some people call a defensive adolescent swagger, he can't trust anybody, not even his mother, especially not his mother. His detractors blame him for the state the world is in. Extremists go one further and say the world is coming to an end. Most of us in this country just want gas prices to go down, the dollar to go up, and America to go back to the good old days. Astrologers can tell you that's not going to happen, but that no matter what, we'll never go broke either. They can also explain George W. Bush's predicament by pointing out that he's a Cancer, and that in coming years, Cancers are going to be challenged to expand their whole worldview. In fact, we can all gain perspective on what is happening politically, culturally, and socially in America by turning to the zodiac, especially the signs of Cancer and Capricorn. For nations, like people, have horoscopes. America was born on July 4th, 1776, when the Founding Fathers decided it was time to separate from England and start a new life as an independent entity. That makes America a Cancer nation. Cancer is the sign of fertility, and America sees herself as the world's nurturing mother. But because of the hostile presence of Mars and Uranus in our solar 12th house, we're the kind of nurturer that can bomb the hell out of a country one day and send over sandwiches and coffee the next. Side note, I think that also resonates with Mars and Uranus in our Sibley chart 6th house, but that's okay. That makes the rest of the world love us and hate us. We're like the rich relative that everybody is jealous of, but still visits for the holidays because there's always plenty of food. It is the sincere and conscious wish of every Cancer, including the USA, to make sure all those under its wing are safe. And if you mess with them, you must be ready to face these special forces. Security and home are primal drives of this sign, sometimes to the point of clannishness or even xenophobia. Side note, see my video on a shadow read of America's natal chart for more on shadow Cancer. America is and has always been about property, taxes, and land ownership. Conveniently, we forget that when the early settlers arrived, they took one look around and said to the Indians, "What a gorgeous place you've got here. Get out." Territory is everything. And if anyone tells you that the essence of the American dream is just about liberty and freedom, don't kid yourself. It is about mortgage rates. Major foreshadowing there. But are we, in the end, ruthless imperialists doomed to be brought down by our degenerate culture? That is the question Pluto's transit through the sign of Capricorn over the next 19 years will answer. It will challenge us as we have never been challenged before, until it will seem that the whole world is against us. But it will also reveal the secret of how we need to change. The sign of Capricorn has always been strong in our Cancer nation's horoscope, and it's going to get a lot stronger. We were born with Pluto in Capricorn, and now more than 2 centuries later, Pluto is coming back to the same place. The seeds that were sown in the 1770s are sprouting at last. That's how Pluto works over hundreds of years. Though Pluto has recently been demoted by astronomers to a not-quite planet, try telling that to any Sagittarius who's been to hell and back over the last 10 years thanks to the passage of Pluto through Sag. The power of this little dwarf is so profound and catastrophic that it doesn't matter if you call it a planet or not, it's a killer. But oddly, it's also a healer. When Pluto moves into your sign, it threatens to devastate you emotionally and physically, letting you know along the way that you must stop whatever you are doing. However you were conducting business or your personal life, that's over. Finito. Kaput. When you come out of a Pluto transit, you are changed forever, in another state. But during the process, you don't realize what's happening. Life can get pretty dark. With Pluto, you can't look ahead. You can't be impatient. And most of all, you shouldn't be afraid, because in the end, there is nothing to fear. You just have to surrender to the mysterious process of complete and total transformation. This is about to happen to the United States as we deal with an opposition of Pluto in the sign of Capricorn to our Cancer sun. And while Cancers and Capricorns will be most strongly affected by this planetary motion, we will all be touched in business as well as our personal lives, no matter what sign we were born under. Because of Pluto's slow motion through the heavens, it takes nearly 250 years to go through the 12 signs of the zodiac, it rules over mass movements and great political and social changes. So it might be useful to look at what happened the last time Pluto passed over the position it holds now and will hold for the next 20 years. Sometime in the 1760s, pamphlets began to circulate in the colonies, exploring new ideologies and belief systems concerning individual liberty and personal freedom. Harmless enough, just philosophers spouting rehashed versions of ancient Greek and Roman notions. But the crown over in England looked upon such doings as seditious. Mother England, once the great protector, was beginning to be the great drag. She wanted payback for all the protection she'd provided. That was when the colonists, starting to exhibit the collective traits of a Cancer nation, came to resent their mother's hold on them. She was getting a little too bossy and greedy. Clearly something was up in the heavens. Pluto was just about to leave the sign of Sagittarius and enter the sign of Capricorn. A transformation was taking place. And so the United States of America was born. Something similar is happening again 230 years later as Pluto is coming around to the same spot. This time, however, it's the American government that is putting the squeeze on the people. A Pluto-style transformation doesn't happen overnight, and events that at first seem random and explosive don't come out of nowhere. They've been brewing and simmering for years. While many people will probably be nervous wrecks during the turbulent 2 decades ahead, many old hippies will joyfully come out of retirement, thankful that the revolution they quit their jobs for 40 years ago may finally be happening. and their kids, born in the 60s and 70s, who grew up embarrassed by their hippie parents, may be shocked to see how right their parents were. When Pluto goes direct in September of this year, the religious zeal or madness that has taken hold since it entered Sagittarius in 1994 will reach a crescendo, ushering in a period dominated by the sign of Capricorn. Our dialogue with radical Islam has only just begun. Over the next 19 years or so, America as a Cancer nation will have to deal with troubling confrontations and competition such as it has never known, as well as an internal political struggle, all of which will shake us to our very core. Capricorn can be pictured as the mustache-twirling landlord in a black cloak, pointing outside towards the blizzard while a poor pregnant wretch begs for mercy. Capricorn forces one to grow up, face life, recognize that it's a tough world. It lends you a dime and asks for $1 in return. It can be the sign of an inspired leader or a controlling, dominating fascist. It can support your existence or threaten it completely. Either way, the presence of Capricorn always indicates big business, and what is America about if not that? Capricorn represents supremacy and power, and if Capricorn is not the most humanitarian sign of the zodiac, it always means stability. Capricorn supports organized society, not rabble-rousing anarchy. It is often perceived as upright and reactionary, mainly because its function is to uphold existing law. It is not progressive or forward-thinking. It clearly represents the deep streak of conservatism that has always existed in the United States, but that seems to be ascendant at the moment. If Capricorn protects the status quo, how did it help sow the seeds of revolution in the original colonies? There's the problem. And the answer, it was not just the presence of Capricorn in America's horoscope, it was the presence of Pluto in the sign that sparked the fight for freedom. If you think that things are tough now, and that privacy and other personal liberties are being infringed upon, just wait. During the next 19 years, things are going to get much tighter. Control and laws will become more stringent. Pluto in Capricorn will demand conformity, born out of fear that different is dangerous. The more resistance to government protection, the more protection the government will try to provide. The words patriot and treason will lose their meaning, and in some cases they will become interchangeable. That's a really prophetic line, wow. What is treason to one person will be patriotism to another, just as it was back in the 1760s and 70s. The country's mood will become darker and much more conservative. It's not going to be a matter of Democrat or Republican anymore because the new ideologies will bleed across party lines. Fortunately, something else will be going on at the same time. While Pluto is in Capricorn, Uranus will be leaving the sign of Pisces and reaching the end of the zodiac, and sometime between 2009 and 2011, the dam is going to break. The last time this happened was at the end of the 1920s. When Uranus comes to the last degree of Pisces, it will spell the end of an era. People will figure, the hell with it. The end is coming anyway, so give me a double martini. As we get closer to that time, people will put all their chips on the table. The stakes will get higher. Incidentally, America began the war in Iraq when the sun was at the end of Pisces, a perfectly moronic time to start anything. Metaphorically, culturally, and sometimes even literally, Uranus at the end of Pisces can seem like a torrential flood that comes out of nowhere. So this is the kind of super specific prediction. Maybe it could be more specific, but he did predict with that sentence and another sentence that is just a little below. He did predict the tsunami that hit Japan right as Uranus was moving from Pisces into Aries in 2011. So yeah, everything that has piled up and been swept under the rug comes spilling out. To the apocalypse crowd, it will seem like the wrath of God because lots of people are going to be headed towards self-indulgence, turning up the music and dancing, even hurrying the end, much as they did in America during the 1920s. When Uranus hits the 29th degree of Pisces, before it pops into Aries, even the Pope could have a stroke over the upheaval the world will find itself in. Uranus in Pisces washes everything away, every hope, every prayer, and the only thing that saves you is the ability to surrender to the inevitable shift. Once Uranus hits Aries, however, a whole segment of the population is going to rise up. When the government becomes business and business becomes government, the people will fight back, and the ensuing struggle will lead to the eventual transformation and rebirth of America. Pluto in Capricorn is going to change America from the inside out, threaten our very existence, challenge our economy, and divide the country politically. The government is going to be so paranoid during those years that it doesn't really matter who gets in 2008. Pluto in Capricorn means the ascendance of overt power of corporations in relation to the government. But that situation will change when Pluto enters Aquarius at the end of the 2020s. So that's one example of the incorrect date, since at least with the tropical zodiac, which he is using when he talks about Uranus moving from Pisces into Aries in 2011. But most of us probably know that Pluto entered Aquarius according to the tropical zodiac in 2023 to 2024. Okay, Uranus in Aries is going to be the 1960s all over again. The greatest time of upheaval will be between 2015 and 2019, when the square of Uranus in Aries to Pluto in Capricorn will create the seeds of revolution everywhere. Forces of repression are going to clamp down even harder on those who want to speak their minds. So this is another place where the dates don't match the tropical zodiac dates. The square between Uranus and Pluto lasted from 2012 to 2015. And during that time was also, some of y'all might remember, the Cardinal Grand Cross. So for a little while in there, 2013 to 2014, you had Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries, Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Libra, forming this 4-point cardinal Grand Cross. And that was during the Arab Spring. So although the dates are not accurate to the timing of the astrology as we are working with it, this prediction is also really accurate. The seeds of revolution being created everywhere. So there was a lot of upheaval and a lot of at least attempts of people in Arab countries during that time to throw off repressive regimes and put better governance in place. Now, there's a whole lot of conversation about how much those were color revolutions and how much the CIA and the West was actually involved. But anyway, it is accurate that this square, Uranus squaring Pluto, showed up as a massive revolutionary impulse. And then Lutin says in the years 2023 to 25, the final stages of the Pluto return and the Capricorn effect will reach a climax. Some astrologers believe that an empire lasts no longer than one Pluto cycle, and by 2025, this cycle will be played out. And no matter how you look at it, the United States is an empire. Just as the British Empire began enduring sunsets after the fledgling colonies won their independence, our turn may be coming. The Pluto return of 2025 will demand a redefinition of the United States and create the ultimate identity crisis. We will have to put ourselves on the line, as we did in the 1770s. So again, the years are a little off. If you use a true sidereal zodiac, the US Pluto return would happen in 2024 to 2025. So using the tropical zodiac, it was 2022 to 2023. Pluto was leaving Capricorn by the end of 2023 into 2024. But again, dates are a little off, but obviously this is happening. The ultimate identity crisis is happening right now for the United States for sure. The period of turbulence that lies before us all in America is not God's wrath or the work of radical Muslims, and it has nothing to do with the hole in the ozone layer. It is a necessary and inevitable step in the evolution of this country, which will result in a reworking of the Constitution in the last half of the 2020s. The political, social, cultural, and economic change will mark the rebirth of the United States as a more global nation, a member of the world, if not the leader of the world. This is a threatening challenge to the notion of land ownership, security, wealth, and supremacy our Cancer nation has enjoyed for more than 2 centuries. The dollar will not likely go back to its post-World War II strength. Other countries will reject our exploitation and demand instead our cooperation. Luckily for us, the horoscope of the USA is strongly influenced by Venus and Jupiter, so we'll never go totally broke or hungry. We will, however, have to play ball with the rest of planet Earth as we never have before. From now on, it's cooperate or else. And no one is really to blame. We've brought ourselves to this crisis through a combination of individual freedom and economic gain, as well as a blind, isolating grandiosity. America is a fabulous place to live. You can come here, think up something you want to do, and be successful at it. but we've gotten fat and we've gotten lazy. So don't blame George Bush or Bill Clinton or any of the elected officials in Washington. A country gets the leader it deserves, and when we're ready to rise from the ashes of a fallen empire, we will find the leaders to help us do it. It will happen, but not in 2008. We have to go through the Pluto transit first. So, pretty cool, right? He was pretty tapped in. There are definitely some things he did not get right, and I'm not going to get into any major critiques because, I mean, obviously this is a prediction and it's kind of just above and beyond for a prediction. No one's ever going to get everything right. And Lutin does kind of leave the reader with the impression that we'll be ready for the rise from the ashes when Pluto leaves Capricorn, which, I don't know, doesn't look like we are quite at that phase yet. Honestly, I wonder if Lutin missed the third US Uranus return and its historical track record. I wonder if he didn't catch that that was coming up in the second half of the 2020s, because that's really the biggest deal transit of that period, like the second half of the decade, in my opinion. And it does not look like a reworking of the Constitution to me. I've got a couple videos on the US Uranus return if you haven't seen them, but my guess is that if there is a reworking of the Constitution, it will happen at the end of the 2030s when Pluto is conjunct the moon in the US natal chart. So we have an eclipse coming up on that moon next month, and I do think that moon corresponds to the Constitution, but an eclipse looks like more of a desecration of it, not a reworking. So we are definitely not at the Phoenix rising from the ashes stage yet. I did want to circle back around to the fact that, yeah, I remember extremely distinctly Vanity Fair canceled Michael Lutin's horoscope column after this essay ran. I wish I had screenshots of what he wrote on his website, but you know, I think it was like a month or so after the column because the next month's issue came out and there were no horoscopes in it. And Lutin just had a sentence at the top of his page, probably for like a week or so before it got scooted down by other things. And yeah, this might not be verbatim, but it was something very similar to wondering what happened to the horoscopes in VF. You'll have to ask them. It definitely said, ask them, or you'll have to ask them, something like that. So it sounded like he was just canceled suddenly without a reason being given. So my interpretation of that now, knowing what I know about the billionaire class, is that some high-powered and also spiritually awake evil people read the essay and didn't like it, didn't like the honest foretelling of revolution being shared with the masses, with us rabble. And, you know, those people do want to keep that kind of occult knowledge away from us. And so I would imagine that they complained to Graydon Carter and he took away Lutin's microphone to appease them. Graydon Carter was the editor of Vanity Fair for about 25 years, and we know he was an Epstein enabler. We know that he cut out Vicky Ward's interviews with Epstein's victims in her 2003 profile on Epstein at the last minute, clearly at Epstein's behest. So what I imagine happened here is that whomever was Lutin's editor didn't normally run his column by Carter, so they also didn't do that this time. And then after it ran, some high-powered person reached out and was like, we can't have this. We can't have these rabble thinking they are being given cosmic permission to rebel. So that's my take on that. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this read-through and commentary. I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think Lutin got right or wrong? What are your thoughts on the billionaire class and the occult? Let me know in the comments below. Quick announcement, this video is dropping on Monday evening, and on Wednesday we are doing a members-only live stream. And the tinfoil hat is coming out. I need to make a new one. I don't have it yet, but it'll be there soon. It's gonna go on my head. And we're gonna talk about some deeper shit. I'm gonna get into some speculation about what might happen if/when JD Vance becomes president, the ways that the different factions inside the Trump administration might clash. And then we're going to talk about some scary deep state stuff, the directed energy weapon that they may have used in Venezuela, the LROD they brought out in Minneapolis, and an update on the military restructuring. For those who have been paying attention, they did do the thing where they moved the defense contractor relationships out from under DOD to be directly under the executive. This is a big deal, and I really do think that something big is coming in the next few years in regards to advanced technology, even more advanced than the sonic weapons or the LROD maybe. So If any of that sounds like a rabbit hole that you want to venture down, just become a channel member. It's only $3 a month. It's an amazing way to support this channel, and I do try to deliver for members, sometimes with tinfoil hat sessions where I talk about deeper, more obscure, darker stuff than I feel like getting into publicly. And I also do other private lives and private videos for members based around the astrology, what's going on, what we need. So do become a member if you would like to support. And otherwise, we'll finish here. Thank you again so much for being here. As always, I also really appreciate it if you like the video, if you subscribe to this channel. You can find me on Instagram if you want at Collapse Astrology, and I will be back again soon.